He's back, and I knew he would be.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
You know, this is a program that I will tell you right now, full disclosure, is being recorded in late May of this year, 2016. We put programs together every once in a while that serve as what we call evergreen programs when we take a day off or that kind of thing. It doesn't mean that you don't deserve good organic programming from Dan Yorke State of Mind. And Sean Daly, yes, Sean Daly, or as I like to say, Sean Daly is my guest this evening. You know, Sean, when he retired from Eyewitness News and the news industry not too long ago, came here and really gave us some, I thought, compelling, profound, and important messages. But, you know, he's way too young, you know, certainly too young to die, not too old to rock and roll, and certainly not too old to be involved in teaching and still some journalism. And one of the things I found interesting about Sean's work is that when Buddy Cianci passed, he was actually pulled back to Eyewitness News coverage of that very compelling, sad, many feel tragic end to the mayor's life and tenure in the city of Providence and, of course, on the broadcast airwaves. So before I introduce Sean, here's some of his work, famous as he is for it, some really Sean Daly-like narrative, pretty profound, following the horse-drawn carriage.
Well, let's step back and talk about the theater of this moment. The snow, Buddy couldn't have invented this. The snow, the pageantry, the bagpipes, the horse-drawn carriage, passing P-PAC. In his wildest imagination, it couldn't have been pulled off better than it's being pulled off right here, right now. You're seeing it. This is exactly, if he were to have been able to script it himself, this is what he would have loved. Let's just say it. Not liked, not thought was okay. He would have loved this.
I think you're right. Welcome back.
Self-evident, I suppose, but nonetheless.
Well, but you know what? This is the second time I've seen it. I saw it pre-show and I'm watching it now. There's something about your style of reporting, when it was full-time and even now when you're called back into it, that cuts to the thing that people are thinking and may not want to say. Now look, in the talk industry, you better have a little bit of that, right? But you have a take which is really fascinating. I don't want to take up the whole show before you even get a chance to say a word edgewise, but as I watch that, you're able to find almost a glass half full, not so melodramatic touch that people would like to get to and in a funeral environment may not feel it appropriate to. But when you do that, it doesn't feel inappropriate. It just feels more buoyant than perhaps I would have delivered. I don't think I could get to where you can get in that particular piece. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. I take it as a compliment.
It is a compliment. No,
backwards
it's an absolute,
though it may be.
No,
but no,
I don't mean it to be backwards.
Well, good. I try to think of myself as every man. I said initially when you set this up, self-evident. Well, maybe it isn't so self-evident, or maybe it is, but I just say it anyway because I think it is important to say and sort of reaffirm what I think, because I can only think what the viewers are thinking themselves. I try to be right where they are. And I was watching it, and literally that thought just came to me. This has to be what everybody's thinking.
Without the notion of he would have loved this, he would have loved this, is probably thought or articulated by everybody that followed that day. But saying it in a broadcast setting is compelling. It's not what everybody would do, is my point.
It's a little bit risky, I will say, because
right.
The tendency in funerals
you don't want to
is
make
to
it
be
show
maudlin,
business.
is to be
exactly.
just all caught up in the death. And of course, it does go without saying, which is why I suppose I didn't say it.
You made a happy point there. And happy is not where everyone thinks they should be in that day. That's my point. It was a happy point.
And yet, Buddy, by dint of his personality, I think he would have wanted that. Not just would have wanted what happened, but would have wanted my commentary on what happened.
Amen. I don't think this conversation could be too deep. And I don't want the whole show to get taken up by it. But I think going back to you and the way you work and your professional signature on so many things, you have an ability to get to a place that others may not decide to go to. Not that they can't, but they don't decide. And once you've crossed over and gone there, people say, that's right. That feels good. So I got to give you a lot of credit. That whole piece just kind of reeked of that. How you doing?
I'm well.
You were called back.
I'm especially well after this introduction.
You were called back into the
start.
coverage, which I thought was exactly what Eyewitness News should have done because of your history, your relationship with the mayor, the perspective that you were able to offer the live coverage. Were you surprised that they called you back to work?
I wasn't actually. I was happily flattered, but not surprised, oddly, because I agree with what you just said. I mean, I think from their point of view, they know they've got a guy in the vicinity who knows, as they say, where all the bodies are buried. Pun, I suppose, intended. Maybe the wrong use of the phrase right there. But I know all the players, and as it turned out, we were able to talk to former Mayor Palino there. We also made minor little Rhode Island broadcasting history there, because now with the technology, we were able to go live as we were walking. I don't know if you caught that, but that narrative came as the camera guy and I are walking from City Hall to the cathedral. That had never happened before. The old days was that the trucks were stuck in certain positions, and you would get the here he comes, there he goes.
Right.
But you wouldn't get the stay with them thing, which is what we had. I had plenty of time to think about that because that was quite the walk. It was, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes in the snow, and I just was able to absorb what was happening. There was a lot happening that day. I mean, it was a very big day in Rhode Island history, I thought.
Well, it was a shocking week in that he was working on Wednesday and he was gone on Thursday, and to have the whole week in between, especially on the radio side, it was heavy. It wasn't unexpected, but it was unexpected, and. To this day, I think people, in the same way that they can't wrap their hands around Buddy Cianci's tenure and leadership, they can't wrap their hands and minds around his loss. And yet, life moves on. So it's a very interesting conversation.
And the death, the day he died, they also brought me back. This was the funeral that we just saw, which was, as I remember, 10 days or so after. I forget the exact timeline. But it wasn't immediate. There was a bit of a lag between the day he died. So on the day he died, they called, and we ended up talking on the phone. And I ended up having back at home, in my own personal cardboard boxes, archives, raw tape that actually the stations just don't have the wherewithal to save in their entirety. It's just the nature of the business and the nature of sort of life in libraries that you just can't save everything. But I had sort of an ear and a sense for history, and some of the big days during Plunderdome, I squirreled away the raw tape and was able to go back and find some stuff out of Buddy's own mouth that became, I thought, especially poignant, because he actually was talking about prison as against dying, which was pretty heady stuff on the day he dies, because I think even in the moment when he had said that, it was actually outside PRO's studio after his last broadcast on his way to prison, and he was musing in all kinds of directions. But one of them was, hey, people, get a grip. I'm not dying. I mean, what if I got struck with cancer? And he literally, these words came out of his mouth in a separate interview that I got with him shortly after that PRO scrum there. And those are the kinds of discoveries that, I mean, had they not called me back, I can almost promise you, I mean, I just pretty much can promise you that I would not have gone down to my basement and looked through my old tapes.
Right.
But because they called me, I did go down to my basement, brought the old tapes in here. Frankly, I can't play them at home. They're on a format that's not playable in a normal household. But there it was, and it was not in my memory. I just knew I had gold, but I didn't know what the gold was exactly. And the people in the newsroom heard it. They heard a Sean Daly shriek when it was a powerful moment when we found that tape. When I saw those words pass his lips, and he's talking about, prison's not cancer. Wow. This was way before he was diagnosed with cancer, mind you.
What's your final take on that
Stuff
whole
like that
saga?
happen.
And then we'll talk more about what you're doing.
Final take on Buddy?
Yeah.
Net plus. Flawed, but net plus. That's where I am.
All right. More with Sean when we come back. Don't go anywhere. So what's the guy do after he retires? He takes up a hobby that he probably didn't have enough time to get into. I try to get my handicap down. Sean Daly that would be my golf handicap. Sean Daly, look, is doing this kind of work. This is magnificent stuff. Holy cow. You've been doing the photography. I love that sky. Where's that?
That is the Warren waterfront, the working Warren waterfront, and that is a sunrise, the likes of which I had never seen before, and I randomly was up at 5 a.m. and grabbed my camera and peeled off 2 frames only, and it was gone.
Well, it makes me feel like, I've lost half my life because my wife is an early riser. I am not, but when I do, I always say, oh my gosh, there's so much beauty about the sunrise in the morning. Get your feet up and enjoy it. The older you get, the less sleep you need, by the way, I've noticed. So you're taking a lot of photos in your retirement.
I am, and enjoying it. And the lighthouses, which we'll get to, there are some lighthouses that are the point of most pride, I suppose.
One.
There's one. This is Nantucket. That is Great Point on Nantucket. You have to let air out of your tires to get there. And that foreground is lighted with a flashlight because it's a 25-second exposure. You're at F8, F11, somewhere we're moving it around. But then to get those foregrounds and to get the side of that obelisk lighted, you also have to bring in artificial light. So it's the left side is what it looks like naturally, dark. The right side is artificially lighted, and then the foreground, the sand, is lighted literally with a moving flashlight during the 25 seconds at various intervals, and then at the end you pick the one that looks the best. And there, of course, is the Milky Way. And this is also Nantucket. This is Sanctity Light, after which a somewhat celebrated beer has been named, and people think of it as a light beer, but in point of fact, it's a beer named after the lighthouse on Nantucket, Sanctity Light. And I liked the way that we were able to capture sort of the helicopter nature of the light, of the beam.
Show me the next one. Is that it?
I think there's some Washington. I went down to Washington and did my hometown. This was, wow. I have been waiting pretty much my whole life to go after this in a big way with a tripod and with the right equipment and the right skills to capture some of the iconic monuments. And I had not seen the Jefferson Memorial frame the Washington Monument the way I was able to capture it, and I just thought it was a different, it was looking at the same thing differently.
Sure, that's gorgeous. Are you seeing any, oh, that's gorgeous.
And that
National Monument.
Well, that involved a little bit of trepidation because I had to cross several lanes of highway in Virginia. We're on the Virginia side now, looking at, of course, the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument. And it was not exactly legal or necessarily smart, but there it is. So,
commercial application to this, or just keeping it to yourself?
Well, there could be, but that's not primary. We'll get to that. I hope to keep it actually as hobby, because I fret that it might lose its appeal and the fun might get somehow drained out of it. I have a better idea. And when we talked last time, I should say, you did get me thinking that I really better think this thing out a little bit. It took a little longer than I thought it would take to come up with what I think is the best use of my time.
Well, to remind everybody, you left the employee here more or less, not on a whim, but pretty close, right?
Well, only to you guys. It wasn't on a whim to me. Okay. This was several years in the works, right. But I just didn't. There are such a thing.
There was a gumpish. There was a gumpish part to it in the sense that you just stopped running, you just stopped reporting, you just said, all right, I'm done, and you certainly you've got a lot of gas in your tank. I mean, from a skill and market presence and journalistic basis. So I think it was kind of a blow, I'm sure, Eyewitness News to have you retire into the industry. And you're right. When you came here, you were like, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. Which is, it's nice to be able to be in a position. To be not too many people get a chance to be able to say, you know what, I don't know. We'll figure it out.
You're right on all those counts. The last of which may be the most important, but that wasn't by accident either. I mean, I planned for it. I mean, you can see the calendar; it's right there.
Right.
You can see.
You plan to retire. You plan to not know.
I did both.
That's okay.
I didn't know the exact date. I didn't know when.
That's not in most people's nature. Most people would want to get a retirement date and know exactly what they were going to do afterwards. You just retired and said, now is the time that I start to think about it, which is unique.
Possibly. I think there may be more of me than people are aware of, but I think there's all kinds of ways to do this and to come at this. And that's the way I chose.
We said you were going to do some teaching, right?
We talked about that, and I have, and I've learned that that's actually not where I want to end up, much as I loved it. And I will say that you were right. You thought I would be a hit, and I was, and I am. And I don't mean to be immodest about this, but the truth is, I have a wealth of material.
You're not being immodest about this.
I have a wealth of material.
I don't expect you to be immodest about
this. I
brought
tapes in, and it was the Sean Daly show for 3 hours, and I did a couple other classes. I've been down even at my alma mater at American University in Washington, and been in a journalism class there. But that just seemed too limited to me to reduce what I have taken from this world to simply journalism. My plan is actually, in some ways, bigger than that, although maybe smaller than that. I want to be a roving.
Wait a second. Is this the plan?
This is the plan. Oh, do you need a setup?
We've got to figure out what the plan is, and you'll just have to wait. We'll be right back. All right, you went potty, you got your popcorn, you did what you had to do, poured another cup of tea or coffee, grabbed another glass of wine because you had to get in. What are you going to do?
I want to get into the schools. I want to be a roving motivator, an inspirational speaker in all the schools. I literally want to be in the room, not on the screen. I want to take my tapes and I want to teach the power of lifelong learning and the power of curiosity, and basically, in its, I suppose, simplest terms, give a TED Talk for teenagers to teach these kids who I think somewhere along the way have been failed and overrun, I think, with data, but not with enough of what the mission really is. The mission, people, is not to squander your time in a classroom and just wait for the bell to ring, but to be thinking about your life. And because my dad taught me, we had many, I was one of 8 kids, and we had many, many acronyms around our house, but the dominant one was that it's a yo-yo world. You're on your own. Now, yeah, we had a lot of love in the family and a lot of help and a lot of this and a lot of that. But in the end, we really are all on our own, and I'm not sure the kids know that. And I think if they had somebody to come in and show tapes and show how questions, if you just keep questioning everything, you eventually get to answers. And answers can be answers whether they're in a news setting or in just your own personal life. And I'm not sure that people are asking enough questions of all the various options. And I have tapes galore. If I could only get the chance and the machinery and the sort of mission to get at all these tapes, I could show how follow-up questions get you to answers, and they get you to places where you weren't at the beginning. And that's what I think the kids should be focusing more on. And I don't think they're asking enough questions of their own lives and of their own possibilities. And I think they're selling themselves short, and I think sometimes the system is selling itself short by just focusing on everything on, okay, we've got math, we've got English, we've got history, we've got this, we've got that. Why are we even here?
Why do you think the curiosity lacks?
I don't know why it lacks, but I know it's the key to the enterprise. It is absolutely the key to the kingdom. And I just think it sometimes is helpful to have and now for something completely different, just new blood, a fresh face, comes in for an hour, and whoa, that guy changed my life. Some bell just went off because I am like sleepwalking through this whole school thing. And now I'm going to really come at this differently. That's in my dreams. That's the kind of impact I would like to have.
Every time
now, maybe I'd only get a couple of kids.
Yeah, but
you say you have 20 or 30 and you reach 4.
Well, here's what you need to do. I gave you advice last time. I'm giving you advice this time. I think this is brilliant. But you will sell yourself and the world short if you don't collect some kind of loose or formal data when you're doing this to find out why the curiosity wanes, why it lacks, what is it that this generation you perceive, and I think you might be correct, why are they not inclined? Why do they need to be motivated to start asking questions? What is it about the current environment of young people today that precludes them from having a little bit more thought about that? Because I agree, it's today, it's right now. I think kids are way more horizontal than they are vertical. They've got a lot of things stimulating them, but they don't go very deep on anything. They're all gadget oriented. They got the fun. But if you do this, and I think you'll be a smash hit doing it, don't come out of it without data that lets you write the book or evolve your project. And you know what I'm saying?
Oh, I do, but you're jumping way ahead. I'm flattered that you've taken it that far. I'm still at the beginning of trying to get out the first phase of it. But of course there would be a two-way street.
But the first phase of it needs to include that, because if you see that you're changing kids' eyes and disposition,
that would be.
Well, then you have to find out how and why you did that.
Of course I would do that. I mean, that's just my nature.
You got to chronicle it. You just can't walk away with it.
I hear you.
I think you'd be fascinating in the classroom setting as a roving.
But oddly, I don't know the mechanism by which to sort of pull the levers of power to make this happen.
Action begets action. You need, you know
who
what?
do I mean, literally.
This is a conversation over a beer we're having right now. I mean, this is hardly a television show, which I'm sure you're fascinated over.
Well, who else gets to advertise their career goals on television?
Well, my marketing mind tells me that you just need a marketing consultation for what I think is a really pure exercise that you want to go through. And action begets action. You know, one teacher that sees this right now, and there will be, and we'll say, yeah, Sean, I'm going to call you in. I'm going to give you an hour.
Call
so
me.
Just
Twitter,
give him a buzz
Channel
and
12.
let him figure the whole thing out. But that's good stuff.
Well, I hope it is. I know in my head, I feel I can pull it off. And the part that I learned from the teaching, so it all sort of is interconnected, is that there's power when you're in the room and the guy on the screen is the same guy standing there talking to you. Now the kids say, wait a minute, this guy's not just talking, off some 3-ring notebook. He's been in the arena. He was there when the state police came to the raid there, at that raid on the Narragansett Indian smoke shop in Charlestown there. He was there at the nightclub fire. He was there in all these various situations. He was there when various criminals were leaving federal court and not wanting to talk, and you get him with the right question and bam, there's your answer. Somehow we got an answer. Then you come out of that and you go, okay, I'm not really talking about that, but I am showing you that persistence pays off. And I think persistence is another underrated quality. Persistence, right? How did you make it? Persistence, right? Don't give up. And don't give up at the first slightest little bump in the road, please. Wait for a mountain at least before you cave.
Invite Sean in. He'll be back here. He's an evolving project, as we all are. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Final word when we come back. Stay with us. Listen, if you've got great HD and you saw Sean sweating, he's fine. He was excited. You should bring him into the school system, you educators. And contact us through Fox Providence. We'll let you know how to get a hold of Sean. Have a great night.